Super happy to be back at Seminole Casino Coconut Creek. Just want to talk about their upcoming series with Run Good and Poker Go. It's going to be about a week and a half long, and I'll be firing in all the events besides the seniors event. So if you guys are in town, be sure to check it out because I'll be firing in these as well. Some days I just feel ready to battle, ready to fight, and today is definitely one of those days. Before we get into the hands, I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time, but I do want to thank Rad Poker for sponsoring another video. They dropped a new game on their app called Puzzle Rush. What Puzzle Rush is essentially you're given a board and you have to select what the best possible hand is on that board, also known as the nuts. You're going to be given 3 cards, 4 cards, and 5 cards as time passes, and basically you try to get the nuts on each board as fast as possible. The cool part about this is obviously it is a lot of fun, and I'm not even just saying this because they sponsored the video, but I genuinely enjoy playing this app. But once again, they do have cash prizes and tournaments. And it's not just one player that wins cash. It's going to be a handful of people each week that win money. All you have to do is climb the leaderboards on that week, and it does reset weekly. So if you haven't gotten the high score for this week, be sure to try the following week to try to win cash prizes. Once again, guys, you can download it in the link in the bio. It's a lot of fun, and I'm sure you guys will enjoy it just as much as I do. With that being said, guys, enough with the sponsor. Let's get into the hands. I sit down with $1,000, and the first hand, my camera's not even set up yet. There's a button straddle, the small blind calls, and we look down at 2 red 9s. Definitely good enough to put in a raise. I make it 50, and the button and the small blind player both tag along. So we're off to see a flop where it comes all low cards, which is always a good sign. It checks to me, and on a board like this, I think I can get value from other overpairs, so I bet $75. The button gets out of the way, but the small blind does decide to tag along. We're off to see a turn, which is not that ideal. The turn comes to ace of hearts, so now there's an overcard to our pair, but we do have the 9 high flush draw to back ourselves into if needed. When she checks it to me, I don't really see what I can get value from that's worse, so I just decide to check it on back. We're off to see a river, which comes a deuce of hearts. Okay, so now there's a 4-liner on there, but there is 4 hearts, and we do have the 9 high flush. When she checks it to me, this is literally once again my first hand at the table. Not really too sure if this player's sticky or what her tendencies are. I think I have enough showdown to just check this one back. So that's what I do, and she shows 2 black 4s. So she had a straight there on the river, but a flush does beat a straight. So we win our first pot at the table. It's not going to take us too long to get involved again. We look down at my favorite hand, ace 5 suited. There's a button straddle, the small blind calls, and I make it 50 in the big blind. Both the players behind me decide to make the call. We are playing 5-handed, and now the button decides to jam all in for only $130. She claims she's tilted, and I kind of believe her, but you can never trust someone who says that they're tilted at the table. Regardless, action does fold back to me, and this is a spot that, considering I raised first and both the players behind me just called, they probably have hands such as like 6s through 10s, while I'm the only one here that can really have aces, kings, ace, king, etc. So I decide to put in another raise as a semi-bluff, and to isolate the all-in player, I decide to bump it up to $500. Luckily for us, our plan worked. Both of the callers behind us get out of the way, so now I can take back all the other money, and we're off to see a run out with no more action. Hopefully we can hit an ace or just any sort of pair, but flopping the nuts is definitely a bit overkill. I just go ahead and table my hand, and obviously we're not going to be losing this one. We win another pretty good pot. I feel like I'm running pretty well in the session so far. In this next hand, there's 2 limps to me, and I'm in the hijack, and I look down at queen jack offsuit. Yeah, sure, I can fold this hand, but we are playing 5-handed, and I do want to get involved. I bump it up to 35. The cutoff calls, the button calls, and now the 2 limpers get out of the way. All right, so we are not playing this hand in position, but we're off to see a flop. The flop comes out king, queen, 8 with 2 diamonds, so we go ahead and flop ourselves middle pair with a backdoor straight draw. I think this is a good spot to just check. If we get called, we will kind of be in no man's land, not really knowing where we are. So that's what I decided to do. Check it, and action does check around. The turn now now is a 9 of hearts, giving us a straight draw, and a 10 will give us a pretty good hand. Action starts with me, and I don't really see any sense in betting here, even though I'm still pretty sure I have the best hand, especially when action checks through on the flop. I start off with a check. Now the cutoff player decides to bet 50. The button calls the 50, and sure, I could put in a raise to protect my pair of queens, but we do block a bunch of the straight draws. So I'm in a bit of a weird spot. I'd expect him to bet a king on the flop, but I think my hand still may be too strong to fold quite yet. I decide to make the call, and we're off to see a river, which is a total dud. The 5 of diamonds doesn't change a single thing. I'd see absolutely no point in betting here. I check, the cutoff checks, and now the button bets 225. Okay, well, this is a bit odd. I'd expect the button to bet a lot of kings on the flop. All the straight draws and flush draws did brick, and considering the cutoff player now checked the river, I'm in a bit of a weird spot. I simply think I'm good here, and I think both of the players probably had draws that bricked out, so I decide to make the call even though there's still a player behind me, and unfortunately for us, the player behind me now reaches for chips as well. Unfortunately, he makes the call too, so when he makes the call, I'm almost certain I'm never good. The button shows 10-7 of spades for a missed straight draw. I say I have a queen, and to my surprise, the cutoff has 2 queens. I don't know, not really happy with how I played this hand, but to be honest with you guys, at the time of the river, I just truthfully felt like I had the best hand. Oh well. In this next hand, there's 4 limps to me, and I look down at 6-7 of clubs in the small blind. I make it 50, and we see 2 callers. So we're off to see flop 3 ways. The flop comes out king 3-6 rainbow. There is a club on board, so we have a backdoor straight draw and a backdoor flush draw. With the pair of sixes, I decide to put in a C bet. I decide to throw out $55, and we only see 1 caller from the player in late position. So we're off to see a turn, which is an ace. Okay. Well, this card should be a lot better for me than it is for him. When I look over at his stack, he only has around $205 behind, so not really expecting him to have an ace here all that often. I just decided to go all in as a bluff. Sure, we could have the best hand here with a pair of sixes, but more times than not, I think he has a king here, and I'll put him in a pretty miserable spot. Luckily for us, he quickly releases his cards, and we get a pretty good bluff through. In this hand, we see a button straddle. There's a limp to me, and I'm in the cutoff with king 8 of spades. I bump it up to 50. The button calls, and the limper gets out of the way. So we're going heads up to a flop, out of position with a pretty marginal hand. We go ahead and flop ourselves the nut flush draw on ace 6-7 with 2 spades. Wow. Okay, a really good board for our range, and we have a lot of equity. I decide to start off with a smaller C bet of $35, and unfortunately for us, he decides to put in a raise. He makes it 100 with the nut flush draw. Nothing else to do than make the call. We're off to see a turn, which is a total brick. The 3 of diamonds isn't going to be helping anyone. I check it, and this time he bets $200. Okay, considering we still each have around $1,000 behind, I think I'm pretty happy to still make the call here. And this is the player that just flatted queens in the previous hand, so I'm pretty sure he has a monster here. I make the call, and we're praying for a spade, but the dealer has other ideas and puts out these 6 of diamonds. I see no point in bluffing here. I say I missed, and he shows ace king. So yep, that hand does make a lot of sense. Our old table breaks, and now we are sitting at a new table, and just admire how nice this felt looks. Good gosh. There's a button straddle on. We looked on at ace 8 of diamonds in the small blind, make it 35. Under the gun is the only caller. So just a quick note, I think I've had ace 8 of diamonds exactly like 4 times in the past 3 vlogs, which is pretty funny. I just feel like I keep on seeing this hand left and right. But regardless, we're off to see a flop, hoping that we get a piece of it. So the flop is king queen 3 with 1 diamond. So we don't really get too much of it, but this board's definitely going to be better for me than it is for him. I expect him to have a lot of smaller pocket pairs here. So if I put in a smaller C bet, expect him to just go ahead and muck those a lot of the time. I throw out a half pot size bet, $40, and he does decide to tag along. Probably just going to give up on a lot of turns now. Expect him to have a pretty good hand, especially when I see bet this sizing. The 5 of diamonds is definitely not going to be a card that I'm going to slow down on. We go ahead and pick up the nut flush draw, and once again, this board still is going to be a little bit better for me than it is for him. I can have kings, queens, king, queen suited, etc. I decided to put in an overbet here. I think this is the best play for one of 2 reasons. The first reason is we have ace high, but a good amount of equity, so a fold would be ideal. But the second reason is if he calls this bet and we brick out, I think we can pretty comfortably check back because he most likely has a pretty strong hand. So after thinking for around 20 seconds, he does decide to make the call. So we're definitely going to need help on this river. Dealer, diamond 1 time, and boom, we do get the 7 of diamonds. Are you kidding me? We back ourselves into the nuts. This is literally one of the best feelings in poker. So when action starts off with me, now that we have the nuts, we do not need to be bluffing anymore. Considering he called an overbet on the turn, I just decide to go all in because I think he does have a pretty strong hand here. So that's what I do. I put in the remainder of my chips, and he says, let me double check. I don't want to slow roll you. And I'm like, what? And he does toss in a chip and shows queen 9 of diamonds. What a cooler. Wow. So that hand does make a lot of sense, but it's hard to put a player on a flush draw when you have one yourselves, especially a backdoor flush draw. So he had middle pair, turned a flush draw, and got the flush on the river. Unfortunately for him, the nut flush is going to beat the queen high flush, so we scoop in a pretty massive pot with a pretty disgusting cooler. After having a pretty miserable start to the month in poker, it's safe to say that I have been running extremely hot lately and getting paid off on all my super nutted hands. So definitely running good, and I'm happy that the chips are coming my way. In this next one, we looked down at a pretty one under the gun, ace king of hearts. I open up the action to 20. We go ahead and see 3 calls. So we're going to be going 4 ways to a flop. The flop comes out jack 10 6 with 1 heart, 2 overs, a gutter, and a backdoor flush draw. All things considered, a somewhat decent flop, but this board is going to connect with other players pretty well. I'm going to start off with a check, and now the +1 player decides to put out $80, a pot-sized bet. The button decides to make the call, and when action's back on me, closing the action, we're all pretty deep, so even though it's a pretty big bet, I'm pretty happy to make the call here and realize some equity on the turn. The turn now is another 10. Our dreams about getting a flush are now shattered. Action starts off with me, see no point in betting here. I check, and now the +1 decides to check. The button checks behind, so now we get to see a free river, praying to see a ace, king, or queen. The king is definitely a card that I wanted to see. When action starts off with me, don't expect any of these players to have a really strong hand here. I think it's very likely they have a jack. Sure, one player could have like queen 9 suited for a straight, but I'll probably just fold to a raise, but I definitely want to be betting on this card. Expect these players to have a jack pretty often. Maybe one player has king, queen, that river top pair. I decided to throw out a half pot size bet of $130. Once again, basically just targeting a jack and a worse king. +1 decides to make the call, which I kind of figured he would with a lot of his jacks. And now the button decides to make the call as well. Really wasn't expecting that. I table my hand and we are good. The button did claim that he had king, queen, so really happy that I chose that sizing there on the river. I think if I go any bigger, either the +1 player with a jack or the button's going to be able to get out of the way. So pretty happy I chose the sizing to get a call from both spots. In this next hand, we're in the big blind. There's a button straddle, small blind calls. We make it $50 with 2 10s. Pretty good hand. Action pulls to a middle position player who just sat down recently, and he now goes all in for $210. Bit of an annoying spot. Action folds back around to me, and sure, he could have jacks, queens, kings, aces here, but he could also have ace, king, ace, queen, etc. that we are flipping with. With the dead money in the middle and already investing $50, I think this is just a pretty easy call. I toss in $160 more and we're off to see a run out. The board looks pretty clean. The turn is a bit concerning with the king of diamonds, and the river is miserable. It is an ace. He shows ace, queen of hearts, so we flopped the nut flush draw and rivered a pair, and ace is going to beat our 10s, so he's going to scoop this pot. Nice hand. That was the last hand of the night. Hope you guys enjoyed watching them. Now let's rack up our chips and hit the cage and exchange them for a currency that we can actually use outside of the casino. Let's go. Whew. All right, guys, we just got out of there. We were in the game for this amount. We were out for that amount. So we won around $1,000. It's pretty good. You guys know the drill. I'm not going to be too loud out here. Even though there's no one around, we should be fine. But anyways, we won $1,000 tonight, which is pretty good. I think, off the top of my head, the only hand I remember was the ace-8 diamonds hand. And obviously that was a pretty big cooler. But other than that, there wasn't really any like huge hands. We were kind of just like up and down. And then we ran 10s and an ace queen for like $250 or whatever. So it's what it is, but I'll definitely take it. We're definitely running good. You know, after a pretty miserable downswing that I haven't really talked about on the channel so far, just because I wasn't recording a lot of the sessions. But you know, I'm happy to have the upswing going again. So once again, guys, hope you guys enjoyed it as always. If you haven't already, guys, it means the world if you guys hit the thumbs up and subscribe. These videos aren't easy to make. Luckily, I do have someone helping me, but the voiceovers and playing, obviously, it's very time consuming. So hope you guys enjoy it. That's all I have, guys. Once again, guys, always appreciate you for tuning in, and I'll see you guys